my story that I'm telling you started 78 years ago. I was a lad of 13 years old in 1943, while the world was still full of war. Where we lived at that time, it became apparent that time became more and more difficult. One day, I think it was the end of March, my dad came home on his bicycle at an unusual time. So I was doing some work in the yard. I was very surprised that he came home, and I saw that the bicycle bags on the back of his bicycle were a bit bulging, and I was curious what was going on. My dad called me and said, "Hold on." So he opened one of the side bags, picked up a white little piece of life, I guess, and handed it over to me. And he said, "Put it on the lawn." So I walked to the lawn, bent over, and put it there. And then in the meantime, he had gone to the other side of the bicycle and gave me a second white living thing. So I put it on the lawn. And then I had a moment that I could really look onto the little creatures. And I saw that my dad had brought home a little billy goat and a little goat. And when I saw that, I said to my dad, "Wow, where's that for?" He said, "They are yours. You have to look after them." I couldn't believe my ears. So what was asked for me, I did. And I was dedicated to the task that my dad had told me to do. I had fun, and we became very close. Wherever I went, the two little goats came after me. And if I sat down in the grass, they laid on each side, resting on my legs. And it was the most beautiful, peaceful time that I, as a 13-year-old boy, ever experienced. It became so great, I must say, that I had no interest in anything else but picking up those two little animals, go to the field, and forget about whatever was happening around. It was a great time, but they were growing fast, up to the point that it was very difficult for me to handle them, as goats probably are doing. As so many other animals, they're curious. So sometimes I had to stop and told them that they had to follow me and not paying attention to other things. We had long, long conversations. I told them stories, and like I said, it was so unbelievable that I forgot about friends, I forgot about parents, I forgot about anything. I wanted to be with my little animals. They grew, and they grew fast. And in the winter of 1943 to 44, it was not that cold, but we had to keep those little animals together in the shed where my dad has 25 rabbits. That's a different story. One day in January, he opened the shed where the rabbits were living, picked up the buck, and brought him to the bicycle shed. He called me and he said, "You know, there's a ladder in the corner. Hold that close to you so that nothing happens." He took the buck between his legs, took a big hammer, hit him right between the horns. And I saw my buck falling down on the floor in the bicycle shed. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what was happening. I felt I was grounded solid into the floor. My dad looked at me and he said, "Don't you hear me?" And I said, "No." And I started to cry, and I had to take the ladder, put it right beside the bucket so that my dad could shove him on the ladder, tied his hind legs to the highest rung, and then he lifted him up in a hanging position with his head down. I will spare you all the details that I watched happening there. And at the time that my dad was almost finished, I ran out, crying, ran out of the back alley to the field where I had been together with those two animals for almost nine months, yes. And I cried, and I cried, and I could not understand what was happening. So with my 13-year-old voice, I yelled to nobody in the silence of the patch, "Why? Why?" Eventually, I had to go home because that was the rule, 6 o'clock or else. So when I came home, I didn't say a thing. I didn't talk to anybody. And when I was asked to do the tasks, I did them. And there were many of them. But I was so shocked to see a living animal that I loved to be killed. And so I asked my dad, "Why did you do this? Why didn't you tell me what you were planning?" His only answer was, "We need the food because there's war. If I don't do what I did, you would go to bed with an empty stomach. So no ifs, no buts. If I find something else that keeps us going, I need your help because your two brothers have gone underground because of the razzias that the Germans did to pick up young people to send them to Germany." I couldn't believe that I had to accept this, that I had to accept that eventually what was my friend ended up at the dinner table. Thinking back, I still cry about what happens in a war, in a bad time, that forces people to do things that are sometimes very, very wrong or very sad. But to stay alive, you have those things that you cannot avoid. And that is what I would like to share with you, that after 78 years, it still is very clear in my mind. I want to thank you for listening to my story. And if you see tears in my eyes, then you know why they are there. I wish you all the best